Good evening, everyone. This is going to be a little bit of a different format of a video. Normally you'll see me kind of describe an issue, show what's wrong with the system, and actually take it apart, show you how to fix it. For this one though, I've got an Xbox One X, not an Xbox Series X, Xbox One X, that has no audio or video output. Unlike the PS4 has a common issue where the port itself goes broken and you have to replace that. For the Xbox consoles, it's more often than not this TDP158 HDMI re-encoder IC. It's not an easy fix. I highly recommend you have some kind of micro soldering skills, a pretty decent microscope, a good hot air workstation, and a good soldering iron. But let's go ahead and jump right into the video. You're just going to see me step by step taking the chip off, cleaning the pads, and then soldering the new chip into place. Alright, let's go ahead and start with this. I'm going to add a little bit of flux to this chip. I've got a little bit too much here. I know Louis Rossmann likes to say bigger the glob, the better the job, but this was a new bottle of flux and way too much squirted out. You do definitely need some flux with this in repair. You also need a good hot air workstation, and you're about to see when I start doing this, I'm actually going to use the knife tip on my soldering iron, and I'm going to butt that right up against the side of the chip right here. This is just to get some extra heat into the ground plane, because there is several layers of thick copper that's just soaking up the heat here. But I'll go ahead and fast forward through this, try and do some good background music. All it's going to entail is just me adding a bunch of heat to this to try and get the chip off. So I got that chip, it came right off. You can see that ground plane underneath it, and then all of the liquid solder just instantly solidifies as the heat is just sucked away back into the ground plane. While it's still warm though, just got a cotton bud with some isopropyl alcohol just to try and clean this up. Once flux starts to cool, it becomes very difficult, very sticky to try and get off the board. Just reposition it, add a little bit of more flux because I'm going to bring in the solder wick and try and get the original solder that was on here off. It's not that it's bad really, it's lead-free solder, and it kind of takes a lot more heat in order to flow, and I'm definitely going to use some leaded solder to try and get that new chip on there. Yeah, just make sure I get that nice and clean. What you'll kind of see is I'm more or less keeping the solder wick in place while I'm moving the soldering iron just to try and prevent those pads from lifting up. And again, it's still nice and warm. Isopropyl alcohol with a cotton bud. Just get it nice and clean. Alright, so the pads are all prepped and ready to go. I'm going to try and do something a little bit different. Normally you just flow some solder from like, just regular, I don't even know, wire looking solder. But I'm going to go ahead and try and use a little bit of paste. This tube that I've got is a little bit old, so the tip of it kind of solidified. So this is just me getting way too much on my tweezers. And I'm just trying to work this around on the pins here. And it's definitely going to be way too much and make it a little bit more difficult, but you'll kind of see that the way I did this here worked out pretty well, because once I got it down in place and pushed down on the chip, all the excess solder flowed up to the edges, and it went in pretty smooth actually. add a little bit more flux here. There is some flux in that solder paste, but just a little bit extra just to make sure everything flows together smooth. And we're done. Adding some heat, you can kind of start to see it bubble. If you look on the edges, it looks like some of that solder paste is starting to melt. And it should start to look a little more liquid on the edges, like right over there on the right side. Everything's coming together. We'll just speed up through this again. Nozzle got in the way, but you can kind of start to see everything is starting to go liquid and kind of suck into those pads right there. And then one little pass, now you can see everything starts to come together, and there we go, almost. One little bit down there in the corner, and tap it a little bit, help it bring together. Swoop. Right there in the spot. All right, cool. So everything's, everything's flowing on there. It's all liquid, but there's a bunch of excess underneath it. So you just kind of push down on the top. You don't have to do it too hard either. Just push it down. That'll force the excess solder from the ground plane on the bottom out. And I'm just trying to reposition it. These pins, these pads are pretty tiny, but you can see everything lines up there pretty well. And just got the heat off. So the next thing I'm going to do is there's these big globs here on the sides, and I'll just take this solder wick, suck those right up, and I'll get most of it, but some of that stuff that's kind of down there in the crevices are going to be a little bit more difficult to get to. So you just take the soldering iron, butt it right up against it, and just sweep out. As long as you've got some flux there still, which there is, it should just help it flow out of those bridges. So the same thing, just go ahead and hit up the other sides here, and then this should be good to go. All right, and of course, after checking over the pins under the microscope, just to make sure everything looks good, we've got to test it, make sure it boots up properly. Let me turn the lights off. Pretty dark. I'll come over here. Let's turn the TV on first. Blue lights and the Xbox. Chime, white light, green signal. Come on. Oh, come on, it's going. There it is. That's very loud. But Xbox intro, so I've got audio and video coming out of it. This TV is only 1080p. It's a PlayStation 3D TV, the one that's designed to hook up with like the PS3 and the 3D games. But we can at least see it's in 1080p, looking pretty good. Just to ruin it, I've already tested it and make sure it works. I've already reset it too. My intention with this one was I bought it just so I could sell it to a buddy. He wants to play Elden Ring with some of the guys at work. But I will finish letting this boot up. I've already installed the game and tested it. I know it's already working properly, but I will end the video here. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. It is a much more complex repair than some of the other things that I've shown on the channel. But anyways, take care everyone. You'll have a great rest of your night.